All right, guys, this is by a Patreon request. Today, we are going to do a whiskey crash course without all the boring bits. Let's get into it. All right, guys, one of my top tier Patreons asked a question about basically a crash course of the whole whiskey scene. And I thought that was a really cool idea. So this might be a podcast that you would send to somebody who's new to whiskey or doesn't really know the ins and outs of it. Now, we're not going to go deep dive into certain aspects of it. We're going to skim over the top of it. Okay. But it's going to be informative. It's going to be, hopefully fun. I've done quite a bit of research, obviously, in the past. So if you want to deep dive each one of these specific things, go back and it's linked in my catalog. So this is a whiskey show, right? So we are going to sip a little whiskey. Now, I will tell you this, this bottle, and if you're on the Patreon, you will already know what I'm fixing to drink. But this is Lost Lantern. If you guys don't know Lost Lantern, they are independent bottler. Basically what they do is they find unique and interesting casks from distilleries all around the United States. I heard some word of possibly overseas soon. But this is called Baltimore Spirits Company. It's a Maryland straight rye whiskey. This is naturally cask strength, 59.4% alcohol, distilled and aged in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm going to read you from the back what it says. This single cask of our first Baltimore Spirit from Maryland is made with 75% rye, 25% malted rye. It embodies the classic profile of Maryland rye whiskey, complex with balanced sweetness and spice. The nose has notes of milk chocolate, candied ginger, and baking spicy, leading into a rich palate with notes of balanced oak, chocolate, buttercream, and lemon zest. Warm, spicy, and welcoming. Yes, please. Now, those of you on the Patreon, most of you, I think all of you, if you are a paid Patreon member, you already have this whiskey. So, cool thing, if you want to drink along with me, if you're not working or driving to work or whatever, you're more than welcome, because this was one of the pours that I did for the Patreon pour. So I'm thinking, and let me know in the comments down below or on Instagram or something, I'm thinking about possibly doing a drink along to where I send a sample to everybody and then we do a live stream and we all drink the same whiskey, hang out, stuff like that. As you can see, there is literally probably an ounce of whiskey left in this entire bottle. So pause for cork pop. Boom. That'll just show you how much whiskey is in there. I am actually going to just kill the rest of it. We're going to bottle it down right here, live action. All right. I am so into rye whiskey right now. It's a really cool thing. It really is. I'm loving it. Obviously, just had Stolen Wolf on. They're just doing some amazing things. A lot of these distilleries are doing great rye whiskey. That's beside that. I'm going to enjoy that and might give you some tasting notes and stuff later. Let's get into business. So let's talk about a fresh angle. Whiskey is like a dialect spoken all over the world, but always using local accents, right? So we're going to talk about the different types of whiskey just real fast. Give me 5 minutes. We're going to get through this. So obviously there's bourbon, has to be made in America, not Kentucky. Yeah. Has to be made in America. Has to be 51% corn, has to be, distilled at no higher than, 160. I'm trying to, I'm getting this off the top of my head. Has to be put in new American white oak, has to be, no higher than 125 proof in the barrel. And for it to be straight, it has to be 2 years old. Now, it's Well, as soon as you dump it in there, it's technically bourbon. If it's made in America, you could dump it in the barrel, dump it out, and it's technically bourbon. It got no aspect of wood, but it's technically bourbon. So that's bourbon in a nutshell. Some people say it has to be made in Kentucky. That is a falsehood. That the legalization thing is in America, and so that includes Hawaii and Alaska. So cool. And now rye whiskey, same way. It's just the rye as the predominant grain, 51%. So wheat whiskey would be the same thing, 51% wheat. Malt. Now there is a delineation with malt whiskey and single malt whiskey. We'll get into that. But like a malt whiskey, let's say it's 51% malt and then corn and, other things, then it would be considered a malt whiskey. Okay. Let's go on to other areas. Scotch. What is Scotch? So Scotch is basically, it's whiskey that is made in Scotland. It's fairly simple, obviously, but they also do it a little bit different, right? Because Scotland, the climate over there is different. A lot of their stuff, 99% of their stuff is put in used casks, either bourbon or wine casks. Predominantly malt, which is malted barley. So when I say malt, I mean malted barley, which barley is a grain. They soak it in water to where it starts to sprout. They get it to a certain point of sprouting, then they stop that process to create the sugar inside the malt, and then they dry it by whatever means, either air dry or in a lot of scotches, they are peated. So they would take peat, which is decomposed earth, take it out, let it dry in the sun, and then they would use those peat bricks. They would burn them to dry out their malt. And the issue was, not the issue, but the thing was, it made a flavor on the malt. It imparted flavor in it and gave it that smoky iodine. Some people say wet Band-Aid, kissing the walrus, mermaid's bath water. It gives you that note. And so there's all different types of scotches, and go back to I did 5 episodes on Scotch whiskey. So go back to those. There's all different types of regions and different types of actual scotches, blended scotches and stuff like that. So now let's move over to Irish. Irish, pretty much the same thing, only it's made in Ireland, right? Now it is a little bit different. They are all a little bit different, right? Ireland is some of their whiskeys, not all of their whiskeys, use a partially unmalted barley, because back in the day when they were trying to get away from paying the malt tax, so they would make it like 40% malt, 50% malt, 49% unmalted, and that is normally called single pot still. Normally, that doesn't mean there is some other. We're not getting into. I did a full episode on Irish whiskey as well, obviously. So just go look through my catalog. I have done episodes on almost every whiskey that's available out there, even weird world whiskeys. I did a full episode on those as well. So go back to those. But now let's get to Japanese. Japanese is basically the same thing. The issue, and it's slowly getting better, but the issue with Japanese whiskey is they don't really have any sort of legality terms to what they're doing as of right now. Now, there are some, and they're working on them. So a lot of, and not all, but a lot of the Japanese whiskey brands are actually sourcing Scotch and putting a label on it, similar to what some of us do here in America, where they source whiskey from Kentucky and then put a label on it as a non-distilling producer, right? But they are not being transparent about it. They're saying that it's Japanese whiskey when it's actually just cheap Scotch that they bottled, which I don't like, obviously. But you can find some really good ones. Suntory makes a whole bunch of really good ones. Mars is doing cool stuff. There's a bunch. Yoichi. I can keep going. Nika has some cool ones. So you have to watch Nika though, because their straight from the barrel is actually just Scotch. Anyway, moving on. So there's all different types: Taiwanese, Tasmanian, Icelandic. you can literally anywhere in the world they're making whiskey, right? Indian whiskey is really big right now, and it's good. So the regionality of that, just understand. So let's talk a little bit about American single malt. Okay, it's a newer category, even though people have been making single malt since, for 50, 60 years, if not more, longer than that. Because you think of the settlers that came over here from Europe, they were coming from Scotland, Ireland. They knew single malt and they knew how to make single malt. But malt can grow here. But in the areas where they were at, it was a rye and corn dominant area. So they had to kind of change their profile and start making corn whiskeys, rye whiskeys, stuff like that. So the single malt thing kind of faded out. There was people doing it, but it was not as predominant as the new rye and corn-based whiskeys, because corn was so much easier to grow and things like that. So let's talk about American single malt, which is different than, say, a Scotch or an Irish. It is made in America, obviously. Now it does now have TTB regulation of how it is supposed to be. Now, they do have what they call American single malt, and then they have straight American single malt, which straight means it's minimum 2 years old. So if you see on the label, I'm going to pull the rye bottle up just one more time. This says Maryland straight rye whiskey. You can guarantee that it's at least 2 years old. Now, I will tell you that this bottle of Lost Lantern, I need to talk to Adam and Nora about this, but this bottle, it did not have an age stated. So it would be called non-age stated, or NAS is what a lot of people put. Like in the reviews and stuff like that, you'll see a NAS that normally denotes non-age stated, which doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it could have 5-year-old whiskey. It could be a blend. Now, this is a single cask. Okay, so this is one cask. So it's not a blend at all. This is a single barrel, as you would say, and we'll get into that. So since I started talking about it, a single barrel is just that. It's one barrel of whiskey. It's not blended at all, right? There's one barrel of whiskey. Sometimes it's watered down with water. So we're gonna get into all that, man. We have a lot to go. I need to take a little drink because I'm talking too much. Oh, that nose on this is nice. I want to thank Chris, who was the Patreon that told me to do this, because I'm always looking for ideas. I have a honey-do list of things that I want to talk about, obviously, but I always like to give back to the community that is giving back to me. And I reached out to everybody and I was like, hey, is there a specific thing you want me to talk about, or go over, or research, or whatever? I'd be more than happy to do it. So this is where we're at, and I hope this is not only enjoyable for the people who have been listening and watching for years, but also if there's any new people out there, I hope it's enjoyable to them as well. So I'm going to take a little sip and we'll go from there. Ooh, that's dusty. That is really dusty. The proof point, it's a little hot on my tongue. Obviously, first whiskey of the day. It's a little hot on my tongue. But man, the flavor that's there is really, really nice. I hope the patrons that got a sample of this, I hope that they enjoy it. And hopefully, if you're listening to this on the weekend or whatever, sit down and have a dram of it with me. Because that's the best part about drinking whiskey is drinking it with friends, right? So let's talk about the industry in 2025. What has changed in whiskey as of this year? So we had a whiskey boom a couple of years ago, and we are coming into the post boom, if you want to call it. We are coming into that. Now we are seeing a saturation of craft distillation. A lot of craft guys coming up, which I'm all for. I want a lot of craft whiskey out there. We are seeing a saturation of that, which is neither good nor bad. There has been a lot of companies buying up other companies, and bigger companies like Diageo, Pernod, Campari buying distilleries as well. There's been foreclosures. There's been all the things. So 25 has been a little rough on the whiskey scene. And we're only 8 months into it. So, take that. Sorry, I'm a little sniffly today. So if I sniffle, just walk past that. I was doing yard work last weekend, and the grass doesn't like me. Okay. Let's talk about some wild innovations that have been going on in the whiskey world. Not recently. It was about a year or so ago. I did a podcast with a company out of Denmark called ETOH, or as I call it, Ethos. And they are a non-distilling producer that is rapid aging or reactor aging. They have a reactor aging whiskey. And I was lucky enough to get a couple of bottles of said whiskey because it's only sold out of the United States. So really hard to get, but I was able to get it, pulled some strings, got some bottles. I actually gave one of the bottles as a test. I am a whiskey sommelier, level 3 whiskey sommelier. So at the sommelier school, I donated one of those bottles. I want to think it was the sherry finished one to the vault. So if you guys are ever in Austin, Texas and want to go by the Whiskey Tribe Whiskey Vault Crowded Barrel and go up to the vault and drink on said whiskey that was aged in Denmark in a reactor, there's a bottle up there. You have to have a sommelier open and pour things for you, but just know I can do private tastings there as well. So if we have a group of people, I would be more than happy to pour you guys some whiskey. So I just putting that out there. If you guys are ever coming into town, just let me know beforehand. I will have my email down below. You can contact me because I will have to get with. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so another thing that has really affected whiskey in 2025 is the marketing and distribution, right? Obviously, this is a whiskey podcast, and we don't talk so much about political things or anything, but tariffs and the amount of, how do I say it? The amount of money going out for things that didn't have to go out for before is shipping is horrible, absolutely horrible. So getting bottles, getting whiskey is difficult today. I've had 2 bottles in the past 2.5 months either not make it to where I wanted them to go or where I needed them, or broke. So there's that, but there's also so many people are influencers now, and they're TikTokies, and they're doing their Instagram reels for these brands, which is great. It's good. It's good marketing. It's good publicity, but it takes away from a marketing campaign that a company can do. So just understand that. If somebody is repping a brand, I'm repping Lost Lantern, right? I will, because I know for a fact they are doing cool things. And they are being transparent in everything they do. They tell you exactly what juice is in there. So just understand that. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the distinction between whiskey with an E and whiskey without an E. So it's really just a name. Yeah, that's all it is. Back in the day in Scotland, they used whiskey without an E. And it stuck. So they don't do it. But there are a bunch of brands in America that still use whiskey without an E. Balcones Whiskey in Waco. Maker's Mark actually uses whiskey without an E. I want to thank George Dickel, I might be mistaken. Maybe it's not George Dickel. There's another large brand that uses, on some of their things, whiskey without an E. It is nomenclature. It means nothing. Just understand that. You're not getting a better product if it has an E or not. It's just regionality, and it turned into a thing. Okay, so just understand that. Okay, so let's talk about distillation. for a second. And now this is going to give me about 15 minutes, and we're going to talk about distillation. So if you don't know already, whiskey is literally grains, yeast, and water, right? That's it, or that's all it should be to be considered that. So you take grains. So let's talk about a bourbon, right? We're making a bourbon, what we call mash bill or recipe. So we know if we're making a bourbon, we're in the United States for one, and it has to be at least 51, which is predominant grain, 51% corn. Now, it doesn't matter the type of corn. It just has to be corn. Most people use yellow dent number 1 or number 2 corn, which is a commodity feedstock. Not feedstock, but it's a commodity grain. It's grown everywhere. It has flavor to it, but it's mainly there for, and we're going to get into it, it's mainly there for alcohol content, mainly. And then, so we're going to make a standard bourbon recipe, a rye mash bill. So the next predominant grain will be rye. So let's say it's 51% 51% corn, 30% rye, which is a very high rye mash bill, and then whatever's left over is malted barley. Now, the malted barley on most bourbons isn't there for flavor. It's mainly there just for, and this is where it's going to get a little nerdy, guys, so just hold on. We're going to get through it. Malted barley has enzymes in it. They're not called enzymes. It's just the easiest way for me to explain it to you. It has these enzymes in it that turn sugar into alcohol, right? So they have enough enzymes, or that we call it diastatic power. That's why I didn't want to say it. They have a high enough diastatic power to convert themselves and something else. That's just how barley is made. So the smaller amount of barley is mainly just there for conversion, because corn can't, even if you malted the corn, which people malt corn all the time, even if you malted the corn, a lot of times it does not have the conversion power to convert itself. It still has some residual sugar left over. So you use that barley, throw that in there, and it converts everything in the mash, right? And then the rye is the same way. You can malt rye. There is a thing called malted rye, but the barley is mainly there just for conversion. Now, some use it as a flavoring grain as well, which is great. We won't get into that. Okay, so you're basically making a beer at this point. You're heating it up to, I'm not going to get into semantics about it. You heat it up to where the starches turn to sugars. All of those, and then the barley is helping everything, and you're mixing it up, and it's a big thing, and it's a big vat, right? It's a hot soup porridge type stuff. You crush the grains, get them all slurried together. You let them sit for 45 minutes or so, however long it takes, and then you do a test on it to make sure all the starches have been converted to sugars. Sorry, the starches to sugars. And then once all that has happened, and it's a simple test with some iodine, or they have meters that meter it. The big distilleries, they know what they're doing, right? So then you take that, which is now called beer or wort. So you'll take that and you'll add yeast to it. It can be any yeast. Most people use distiller's yeast, obviously, because that's what it's for. But in every brand, some of them have a house profile. So it's a house yeast that they do, because they'll have open top fermenters. They'll have what they call terroir, which just means the territory that's around the distillery has its own flavor. And they want to kind of hone that. And so they would make this yeast. They would cultivate a yeast in that area underneath some trees or whatever, and get that natural yeast. And then they would add commercial yeast to it as well, just to kick off everything. Some do, some don't. All semantics, doesn't matter. So once the yeast is put in there, it is considered a beer. And then, because it's not a sugar substance anymore, that yeast is eating the sugar and doing three things. The yeast is eating it, converting it into alcohol, ethyl alcohol, and also carbon dioxide, which is basically farting. Not to be a 7-year-old boy, but it's basically farting. So its waste, its byproduct is CO2 as it's converting. So you let it go for 3 days, as Dr. Pat Heist likes to say 3 days is the best. Some people go 7 days, depending. You get more ester compounds, but you can also get some unsavory things as well. So just understand that. Then after it's been fermented, you can tell because there's no sugar left in it. Then you have a percentage of alcohol in that beer. Like when you drink a beer, like a Bud Light, go buy a Bud Light. It has 4% alcohol in it. It was turned into a beer, and it was a wort before. Now it's a beer, right? So then they take that beer, that what they call their distiller's beer, and they distill it. So distillation in itself, there's 2 or 3 different types of distillation: pot distillation, column distillation, continuous still distillation. I even talked about 3-chamber still distillation. Go listen to that one. That one was fun. So there's different types of ways to distill. I'm going to talk about pot distillation just because it seems to be the easiest to talk about. So basically, it's a huge pot, most of them made out of copper or stainless steel, and it either has steam injected in it that has a heating element like you would have in like a water heater, right? It has a heating element. It's steamed, or it has a jacket around it that has oil ran through it. There's all different. Some people have direct fire, right? Like the old moonshiners used to do, stick a fire underneath it, and it's pretty cool. So then what would happen is the alcohol boils or starts to condensate, or starts to evaporate at 172 degrees. Well, we know that water, and now that's Fahrenheit, obviously, for all my European listeners. Now we know water is at 212, right? So there's that gradient there between 172, 173, some people say, whatever. There's a gradient there that you have to where the alcohol alone will start evaporating off. Well, then basically is all you're trying to do is evaporate just the alcohol, leave all the other stuff behind. So it goes up, and then it goes into what they call a line arm, which is basically comes off the top, goes down, and then it goes into what they call a condenser, which is basically running cool water, not on it, but around it. A lot of times you'll see, if you guys have ever seen the old moonshine show, they would have a barrel, and they would have a copper pipe ran through it, and they would fill that whole barrel, not inside the copper pipe, the outside of the copper pipe, with water. And then as the distillate comes over, it hits that cool water, and it starts to condensate again and start to collect back and turn into a liquid. Simple physics, right? Or science, or whatever it is. So then the distillate that comes off of there is called low wines, because this is the first distillation. It's not really great. You're probably going to get about 30 to 40% alcohol on the total run. So then what you're going to want to do, take all of that stuff, dump it back in there after you're done distilling everything, and distill it again. And then you're going to take what they call cuts. You're going to have your heads, which is the methanol, the bad stuff, make you go blind, watch out. And then there's the hearts, which is the good stuff, the stuff you want to keep. And then there's the tails. And then once you get further into the tails, it's more like smelling wet concrete or wet dog, cardboard. It gets a little funky, a little weird. So you want to try and keep the middle part, right? As much as possible. Now, if you were in Scotland or Ireland or something like that, your cuts can be a little wider. And I'll tell you why. Because right after you distill it, you are going to proof it to your proof point of going into the barrel. Now we're making whiskey, right? Now where it's going to be aged whiskey. It's not going to be what we call new make. Right? We are actually going to age it. So in Scotland, they'll take a used barrel, could be a used bourbon barrel, could be a used wine barrel. It doesn't matter. They will take that, and they will dump that newly distilled whiskey into there, and they will let it sit for however long they want. In Scotland, they let them sit for 10, 12, 15, 25 years. So they're able to cut, how do I say this? They're able to cut their whiskey a little bit wider and get a little bit more heads and a little bit more tails, because they know it's going to age out. Does that make sense? They get more yield because they know they're not even going to touch it for at least 8 years. Whereas in, say, Texas, that's where I'm from, we're having to figure out a way to keep the whiskey in the barrel, because we have such a loss. So we're trying to find ways to keep the whiskey in the barrel for 2 years, let alone 20, right? So just understand that. Once it's in the barrel, it sits 2 years to be straight. And then after 4, it doesn't have to state the age on it. But if you have a 10-year-old whiskey, you're probably going to put 10-year-old whiskey on it. And then it goes into, they proof it down with water. Most people use reverse osmosis water. Some people use spring-fed water, just depending, as long as it doesn't have a microbial load. I know that's plumber talk. I'm sorry. As long as it doesn't have a high microbial load, then it's good. If it's good drinking water, then it's good to, but sometimes with the mineralities and stuff like that, you just got to kind of watch out. That's why most people use RO water, right? They'll proof it down to whatever their bottling proof is. Some are 95, some do it at cask strength, right? To whatever that is, whatever it came out of the barrel at is what they bottle it at. And so that's that. So, and then guess what? And then it goes into a bottle, gets marketed, get put on a shelf, and then you buy it and enjoy it. All right, so they have the whiskey going to the shelf, right? So now, what makes the whiskey good, right? How do you know which whiskey to get? That becomes a problem, because you go to the liquor store, your Costco, or wherever you buy adult beverages, right? And you see the shelves are just loaded down with all different types of whiskey. Everything from Scotches to Jack Daniels to Monkey Shoulder to whatever. Everything is out there. It's very strange. So it's not just taste, right? It's terroir, it's people, it's the barrel, it's time, it's intention. So what whiskey tastes good? That's kind of a loaded question, because whiskey is so personal, right? What I like, and tasting a whiskey is so inherently like memory. It's a muscle memory. When you taste something, like me tasting this Baltimore Spirits from Lost Lantern, right? It takes you back to a memory that you've had, or maybe a new memory that you're creating right now, which is really cool. So it's very personal, the whiskey. Now, there's some whiskeys out there that are just, yeah, that's good. It's fine. Grab it. So there is sensory bias, and there's also bottle influence. We always see, get this new bottle. Like if you ever go to Total Wine or Specs, they're like, hey, Jimmy, he works in this department. He said that this bottle of whiskey is really good. And it's some house brand you've never heard of. It's distilled Barton, 6-year-old distilled Barton that they put their label on, which nothing wrong with that, right? Is it good though? Well, it takes discernment. You know what I mean? It takes you listening to people that are doing reviews, but it also takes you trying a whiskey and seeing if you like it. That's why it's so cool to get samples from somebody, or go to like a whiskey bar. There's Whiskey Cake. There's a bunch of whiskey bars out there. I don't mean bar like 2 a.m. in the morning, you're sitting there throwing shots back. I meant like a place where you can go and have dinner and you can do all the things, right? And it's fun, and you make an event out of it, and you try a couple of cool whiskeys. And then if you like that one, you're like, hey, write down a little. I know it's nerdy. I know you don't want to like have notes on your phone of what whiskey you thought was pretty good, right? And then if you liked it, go pick up a bottle. So let's talk about when you're storing whiskey in the barrel. You hear this thing, and Wild Turkey is known for this. Rickhouse. They're Rickhouse. Well, the Rickhouse is just basically a storage unit for the said barrels, right? When you have 1 million barrels out, you got to put them somewhere. They can't, you don't want to get them rained on, so they have to be in a building, but it can't be too enclosed because it's alcohol, right? And gets too hot, it's going to explode and it's going to burn, or it's going to do this. So they have a certain way that they put them in there. So at the top of the rick house, they sometimes are 7 or 8 floors or stacks high. At the top, obviously, you're closer to the roof. So the roof is penetrating heat down. So those typically, and of course, this is not, the standard, but I think it is. Typically, those are going to be your spicier barrels, your hotter barrels, right? There is a sweet spot. And then obviously the first floor, the bottom floor is going to be your slower aging spirits, your spirits that are going to take a lot more time. So if you're doing a Pappy 23, it might need to be on the first floor because 23 years in a barrel is a long time, right? So there's a sweet spot. When I talked to Kyle over at Holiday Distilling, he said that there's a sweet spot at like Rick 4 or 5 for them, of course, that they pull off of for their basic, releases, not so much their single barrels or their special projects or anything, but for their basic releases, 4 and 5 are normally where they are. And I know that's different for everywhere, but if you look at like going back to Wild Turkey, if you look at, they have their special rick houses like Camp Nelson and, Jack Daniels has their Coy Hill, and it's just like special places where they get what they call the honey barrels, these barrels that they know that are just going to be fantastic. So just understand that. So let's talk about okay, no, hold on. Let's talk about bias a little bit. Let's talk about what's in the bottle versus what's in your head. Now, make this make sense, right? You go to the liquor store and you're like, hey, I've heard a lot. I'm going to throw a brand out there, right? I've heard a lot about this Penelope cigar blend or whatever it's called. I'm going to pick up a bottle because, dude, I watched a video of his. Dude said that it was good, right? Okay. So you automatically have a preconceived notion in your head that said whiskey is going to be good, right? Because you just automatically think, and that's what we do as humans. That's what we do. We find people that have like interests, like, oh, he likes this, I like that, so he might also like this. You know what I mean? Kind of like when you're on Netflix, right? And it says, you like this show, you might also like this show, right? That's kind of how our minds go. They go in that area, right? So understanding that. So you get the bottle and you take it home and you're excited to pop it, right? You want to pop it open and have a dram of it. Is it bias? Or is it that maybe the bottle didn't live up to your expectations? Now, all that being said, there is neck pour, there is oxidation in the bottle, there's all the things. There's all the things. Like there's so many different nuances to the bottle that give it a second and third chance sometimes. But sometimes the bottle's really not worth the hype. I've had quite a few bottles in the past where I'm like, I bought that because somebody said it was really good and they didn't hit. Not to say they were bad. They were not bad. They just weren't my flavor profile. And that's the thing. Find your flavor profile and move from there. Right? So get out of your own head and look at the whiskey for what it is. And am I being influenced to enjoy this whiskey when I really don't? And it's okay if you don't. No, we have different palates. We're different beings. So let's talk about the business side of whiskey, right? It's going to be 5 to 7 minutes. So it's not too long. The whiskey world in itself is both agricultural and alchemy. But now it's also big business. So there, in some states in the United States, there are distribution tiers, right? Distribution tiers that the distiller distills the whiskey, bottles the whiskey, and tries to sell it. Well, he can't, in those 3-tier systems, let's say I'm a distillery. I can't take my bottles, like on a dolly, take my bottles to a liquor store and say, hey, I want you to sell these. No, you have to go through what they call a distributor, right? Well, Texas in itself is what they call a 3-tier system. So it has to go through a distributor, then it has to go this. So it touches hands more than 3 times. You call the distributor, which a lot of the big ones around here are RNDC, which is Republic. And there's a couple of other ones that I don't know right off the top of my head. They basically said, okay, the chances of this whiskey selling are pretty good. So we're going to buy 2 cases or 2 pallets, depending. We're going to buy from you 2 cases or 2 pallets at your manufactured retail price. Then we are going to turn around and sell that to the liquor store for a profit because they're the middleman. And so they make their money off of selling it to them. So if I'm selling a bottle for $50, let's just say $50, they are going to sell it to the liquor store for, say, $60. I don't know the exact math and I don't care. And then the liquor store obviously has to make money. They can't sell it for, or they're going to say, okay, your manufacturer retail price is $50. I am going to buy 2 pallets of it for $40. Okay, you're still making some money and you're getting rid of 2 pallets of whiskey. You buckle and do it. Then they end up selling it for $45 to the distillery or to the liquor store, and the liquor store sells it for your manufactured retail price. So if I was to go into your distillery today, or you were to come into my distillery, I would sell the bottle for $50. But there's a reason it's $50 in the distillery and $50 at the liquor store, right? It's because I had to sell it to the distributor for less. That's more than likely what. But then you also get what they call secondary market, where people are just price gouging. And they find a cool, unique unicorn bottle. And they're like, you know what? This is a $70 bottle. How about you pay $700 for it? And dummy people will buy that because they're like, I've always wanted this whiskey and I must have it. And I will forfeit my mortgage for it. Okay. So the distribution in the US is, and there's some people that can ship, especially one of the only good things that came out of COVID, and I'm not trying to talk about COVID. One of the good things that came out of that was the fact that you could do direct to consumer shipping most of the time. So places like Seelbach and Big Thirst and all of these places, they kind of erupted and turned into something where they would take a brand's whiskey and be able to ship it to some guy in Tuscaloosa who would have never seen that whiskey before. Super cool, right? It's super cool that you're able to do that now. Back in the day, you couldn't do that. So people are getting so many cool bottles that they would have never got before. Lost Lantern is a prime example of that. I would never be able to go to Vermont and buy whiskey if they didn't have cool shipping options, right? Just understand that. Now, shipping rates, they get expensive sometimes. So just watch out. So let's talk about this. I kind of touched on it, but hold on. I keep having to adjust my chair. I have bad posture. I'm sorry. Let's talk about limited edition madness. Okay. There's so many whiskeys out there that are very limited, single barrels or BTAC or whatever you're looking for, right? Everybody's looking for the horsey, right? Everybody wants the horsey. There is a madness behind it to where people will do whatever it takes. They'll stand in line for days for a chance to get a bottle of some things, depending, obviously. They will stand in line for days. They will pay secondary prices for it, which is basically double, if not triple, the cost of the said whiskey, just to say that they have it, which I understand. There are some bottles out there that I would love to get my hands on. But I'm not poo-pooing you. If you want to do that, that's fine. But you have to understand that there is some of that out there. And then that goes into secondary market and the FOMO that goes along with it, the fear of missing out. Everybody's drinking that new Penelope Rio. Don't you want one? Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. I got one. You want to buy it? $300. Well, it's 60. It's 60 at the liquor store. Why is it $300? Do you want it? It's $300. Yeah, that's what happens. And there's some that are just outrageous. $6,000, $7,000, $10,000 for whiskey. I'm sorry. There's no whiskey good enough for me to pay that much money. I'm sorry. There's not. I've been a little more okay with paying $200 for some bottles. Very rarely though, because man. So let's talk about how the bottle you buy supports the farmers, the coopers, the chemists, and the marketers. And that's the thing. You have to understand that when you buy a bottle of whiskey, I'm going to pick up this Lost Lantern again. It's long gone. There's actually a drip in there. So I'm going to take that little drip. This bottle of Lost Lantern, it changed so many hands, and there's so many people that were touching it. And then you think about the people over at Baltimore Spirits, and you think about what they had to do to get this barrel of whiskey to Lost Lantern. The person who made this glass, or the factory who made this glass, this label, the farmer, the people that tested it to make sure that it was not, I mean, whiskey's poisonous, but, that it's not like, it doesn't have E. coli or something in it. Anyway, there's so many hands that touch a whiskey before you actually get it. And that's why, and that's the thing, like whiskey in itself is a luxury. Yeah, it is. Do you have to have it to live? No, you don't. Some people think they do, but you don't have to have it to live. Whiskey's fun. It's there, and it's a good time, right? Because we talk about it. Good Lord, I've, got almost 140 episodes on whiskey already. So it's like, yeah, it's a thing, but it's not everything, right? So just understanding that there's a lot of hands that touch it, and there's a reason that some whiskeys cost what they cost. And some of them are very proud. They're very proud of their whiskey. So therefore they're like, we're not backing down. It's a $150 bottle. You take it or leave it. And either you'll buy it or you won't. And that's MSRP. That's not secondary. So either you'll buy it or you won't. And that's life. And that goes for everything. Think about it. Go buy gasoline, right? Go buy gas for your car, truck. Yeah, you complain about how much it costs, but it's kind of a necessity, right? You need it to get to work. You can go electric, but even at that, you're still using money from, charging your electric car. So it's the same. It's same, right? Okay, so let's talk about how you can start your whiskey journey. Yeah, you're 47 minutes in now, and how do you get into whiskey? How do you do the whiskey thing, right? Let's do this kind of like a choose your own adventure style, right? To where like you pick how you want to start. If you want to just sip, like you just want to sip a whiskey, start with a balanced bourbon, right? Something that's not too over the top, something that's not too harsh, something like a Eagle Rare or a Old Forester 86, even Elijah Craig, not the barrel proof, even Elijah Craig. There's a bunch of bourbons, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels is not bourbon. Yes, I know. But you want to start with something balanced, something, in the industry, we don't say the word smooth, right? But something a little more palatable, right? But let's say you want to explore, you want to find new things, right? Try regional things like with the Baltimore Spirits, right? Try something regional, or try a peated Scotch, right? Try something that's totally different from your profile. See if you like it. Guess what? If you don't like it, that's fine. There's so many other ones out there that you can try. Now, if you want to collect, I give you one warning. Beware of the traps. Beware of the traps of collecting, because it turns into an obsession. I did a full podcast about that. Now, there's nothing wrong with collecting whiskey. People collect Pokemon cards. They collect cars, hairpins, toenails, however you want to do it. Just don't let it turn into an obsession. That's all I would say. Now, if you want to learn, if you want to start your whiskey journey with knowledge, there's so many things you can do. There's resources out there to where you can, books. I have a whole bunch of books behind me. You can't really see them. I have so many books behind me about whiskey tasting, about whiskey distilleries. I bought this new one recently called Whiskey Opus, and it's a huge book about as of 2025, all of the distilleries that have a distilled spirit producer license. And it basically gives a short summary of them. So if I'm doing a deep dive on Baltimore Spirits, for instance, I can go back to that book and say, oh, they got started in 2009. Their head distiller is blah, 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 and I can go through there and say that, because some nerdy people want to know all of that, right? They got bought out by this person in 2014. All of the things, you'll know that. And then also, one of the easiest way to get started and to really kind of dip your toe into whiskey and to get the full experience of what that whiskey is to visit a distillery. Doesn't matter which one. Just visit, go local, obviously, wherever you're at, go somewhere close by to you. Find a distillery, go over there and say, hey, I want to try everything you got. They normally do flights. You can try a lot of their whiskey. You can go in there and be like, hey, I like this. I don't like this. Let me see how you made this. A lot of times they'll do tours. They'll do private tastings. They'll do, pour your own bottle. It's so much fun, right? So go out there and get out there. That's the other thing. I'm reading my notes. I'm sorry. We're getting close. We're getting close, guys. So one, this is my little take. If I can find my thing, this is my little take on it. All right. So this is going to be like the Whiskey Shaman's how-to, right? So understand when you're getting into whiskey, it's not go look at 5 things I wish I knew before I got into whiskey. It's a YouTube video I did. It's pretty cool, I think. Just go look at that. I'll try and have it pinned down below. But it doesn't matter. Just get into whiskey, right? It doesn't matter if you know everything. It doesn't matter if you don't have to be the whiskey dude to get into whiskey. You don't even really have to, and I'm going to say this, you don't even really have to like whiskey. Whiskey is definitely an acquired taste. I know there's people out there, like my wife, for instance, she can't stand whiskey. She doesn't want anything to do with it. She supports me wholly and everything that I want to do with whiskey, but she doesn't care about it. And that's okay, right? But try whiskey cocktails, try whiskey neat, try whiskey on ice. Just go out and try whiskey. And don't worry about what everybody else is drinking. Don't worry that this guy has all the BTAC and this guy has the blah de blah 28-year-old Lefroy double triple oak, limousine cask. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. You worry about yourself, stay in your lane. That's all you got to do. All right, so we're going to do some myth busting. Okay? A little bit of myth busting. Now, if you go back to one of my previous podcasts I did with Mr. Drew Hanish from the Whiskey Lore podcast, he kind of busted my balls a little bit. Sorry. He kind of hit me hard because I did a video on my YouTube called Whiskey Myths. And this is similar to the same thing. And I, before I did my book club and all of the things, I said that Tennessee whiskey was just bourbon that was charcoal filtered. I was wrong. And so myths are made to be broken. Amen? So just understand that. Here's a couple quick ones just for you new guys out there, okay? Older whiskey is better. I'm going to give you a couple seconds. Cheers. Older whiskey is better. Yes and no. It's a myth. Older whiskey doesn't mean it's better. Just because it has a 12-year-old age statement or a 28-year-old age statement or a 42-year-old age statement doesn't mean that it's better. Now, there is something to say about maturity in a barrel. There are some whiskeys that I've had that are 8 months old and they're really good. I'm serious. But there's also like the Black Art that's right behind my head if you're on the Patreon. It's 29 years old. One of the best whiskeys I've ever had in my life. Not lying. So there is something to say with age, but it's not so much age, because think about Texas, right? We're barely getting 2-year-old whiskey out. Well, people are doing things to make it last longer, but like we're having a hard time. We're fighting age statements at this point. Just because it's a 5-year-old whiskey, that doesn't mean that it's poor. That just means that it has felt its full maturation in that time, right? Because it doesn't take long in a barrel, depending upon the pressure, the heat, the humidity, all the things, for a barrel to impart flavor and color and tannin and, acridness and all of the things. You can have an over oaked whiskey in under 2 years. Absolutely. So it's not so much the age, but it is. It's more the maturity, right? Because when a whiskey is distilled, and we talked about this earlier, but when a whiskey is distilled, you have to think about it in a molecular type response. There's still water in the alcohol, right? It's not 100% ethanol at this point. There's water in there as well. And when it's distilled, it's fractioned, right? It is broken apart. Have you ever looked into a microscope and you see all the little anemones and stuff running around and all that? That is what whiskey is like when you first put it in the barrel. It's disjointed. It's broken apart. It's not cohesive, right? So what it needs, and going back to the talk about the reactor whiskey. Now, he took whiskey that had been sitting in vats. Now, vatting a whiskey is different because it's in a stainless steel. It does not age or mature, right? But it does do what they call mellow, and it will get more cohesive. So he vatted his whiskey, his white clear spirit, for a number of months before he did his reactor to it. Once it starts reaction is when he calls aged. And then so he ages it for 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, depending, obviously, and the whiskey that comes out. But he also, on some of them, not all of them, on one of them, and I'm going to say the word, he bastardizes it by adding malic acid. Now, malic acid isn't toxic at all. A lot of people have citric acid, right? I mean, citric acid is in Sprite and sodas and stuff like that. So it's not toxic, but it's to give you that puckering of the tannin, which you're not getting, obviously, in the whiskey, because you can't get that in 10 to 14 days. There's no way you can. Now, they're using extreme heat, extreme pressure, all of the things to get as much contact with wood. They're not even using oak on some of it. One of them I have is acacia wood, which is super cool. Don't get me wrong. It's nerd level 10,000, right? But bastardizing the whiskey to turn it into something when it's not something at that point. I'm not saying it's good or bad, right? I'm not. I'm just saying older doesn't mean better, but brand new and reactor aged doesn't mean better either. There's a fine line. And every person, you can go back and listen to most of the interview podcasts I've done, and they're going to tell you that, like, we pull it when it's ready. When it's ready to be pulled, we pull it. Herman over at Dad's Hat, he's like, at 17 months and 30 days, I pulled it. Well, you didn't wait till 18 months. No, we pulled it when it was ready. And that's it. So I thought that was pretty cool. So don't think that older means better. Now, a good age statement is great, obviously. Most Kentucky bourbons are good between 6 and 8 years old. I've had some 15-year-old whiskeys that were absolutely fantastic, but I've had some 10-year-old whiskeys that were crap as well. So you just got to kind of weigh it and not get into that hype of the age statement and all the things. Okay, here's another one, and I'll give you a second for it. All bourbon must be made in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. These are still things that people think, right? Some people don't even think that bourbon is whiskey. Make that make sense. They feel like bourbon is something completely different than whiskey because they think whiskey is Scotch and they think bourbon is bourbon, even though they're both distilled from grain, right? That's what makes a whiskey a whiskey. It has to be distilled from grain. That's why JT Mellick, go back and listen to my episode with Mia over there. Amazing. Doing rice whiskey. So good. Bourbon can be made anywhere in the United States, in the 50 states, maybe even in Guam. It's a territory. I don't know. Look at your legalities of that. There's another one, and I just did a whole book club about the lost history of Tennessee whiskey. And some people believe that Jack Daniels wasn't even real. And I can understand that because he was a very boisterous, he was a very outlandish, he was a very big persona of a man. Now, I wasn't around back then. Was he made up? I have no idea. I know that the distillery is real and the people working at the distillery were real. Obviously, they were creating product and they still do to this day. So one thing I will say, and this is just my personal opinion, you take that for what it is, because opinions are like something else. We have them and they both stink, right? So my opinion is, does it really matter if Jack Daniels was real? He created a product, whoever, Jack Daniels or whoever else, created a product that has withstanded the test of time. Everybody knows. Everybody. If you don't even know what whiskey is, you know what Jack Daniels is. Amen? So, it doesn't matter if he's real or not. Sometimes the best story gets ruined by the truth. Now, do I personally think that Jack Daniels is real? Yes. Do I think he was the type of person that everybody said he was? Possibly. You know, there's a lot of those philanthropist type. They're very boisterous. And back then, you know, they had the filibuster type, you know, maybe. But in the end, doesn't even matter, right? So I'm going to give you a couple of questions that I've actually got from listeners that I hope to, I've answered them in the past, but I'm going to answer them again. So one of the questions I got was, how do I become a whiskey sommelier like yourself? That's very easy. You go to the Wizard Academy in Austin, Texas, and you take the course and you pay the money and you do the thing and you hopefully pass. And that starts your journey. Whiskey sommelier in itself is not a title, really. It comes with a lot of responsibility because we are there to uphold the whiskey for what it is, but also treat it with respect, but also realize that it's not real and it's not a thing and it doesn't matter, right? That's what a whiskey sommelier is. So I call myself a sommelier, but I also call myself a whiskey shepherd because I want to feel like I'm shepherding people in the ways of whiskey. Make sense? All right, one more. Early on, someone asked me why. Oh my God, what was it now? I'm trying to find it. Why in history, why does it always show people as being very anti-whiskey, right? In history, like look at Prohibition, right? Look at Prohibition. People are against whiskey because, and I'll be the first to say this, it is a drug. It is a drug. And there are things about whiskey that are very negative, and the connotation of them is negative, and it should be dealt with respect, obviously. But a lot of people feel like whiskey in itself is different than, say, wine or beer or even gin and vodka, right? They feel like whiskey. I don't drink the hard stuff. Well, okay, alcohol is alcohol. Ethanol is ethanol at this point. Now, obviously with beer and wine, there is different congeners and stuff inside it. So it is different. If you've ever drank one too many beers or one too many glasses of wine, you know. So yeah, people have a negative connotation about everything. People are going to voice their opinion about everything. And yes, whiskey's not good for you. I did a whole episode on the FDA rulings on whiskey that are changing. You know, it used to say on the back of the bottle that this could impair pregnant women and their fetus, right? Well, now, and this is near and dear to my heart, now they're going to, I don't know when it's going into law, but they're going to start making them put, there's also cancer-causing agents in it. Acetaldehyde mainly. But the issue with acetaldehyde is it can be removed most of the time. Sometimes it can't. That has to do with your fermentation temperatures and times and letting it sour, stuff like that. So I feel you're going to see a lot more what we call sweet mash distillation, turn and burn distillation, as we call it, to where we do a 3-day ferment, we distill it right away. We don't let it sit. We don't let it sour. We don't let it get a lacto or lacto. We don't let it get any sort of other bugs or fungi or anything like that. I feel like you're going to see a lot less of the foeders, however you call them, the big vats, and a lot less open air fermentation. And it's going to be all closed contained type fermentations. I don't know this for a fact, but that's just what I'm thinking in the near future is going to happen for me personally. Not for me, but you know what I mean. So that's that. That's Whiskey 101 in itself, in a nutshell, in a podcast. You know, that's the crash course. I tried not to give you the boring stuff, but guess what? Sometimes whiskey's boring. Yeah, sometimes whiskey is sometimes whiskey is science, and sometimes whiskey is history, and sometimes whiskey is what it is. But the one thing that whiskey is always, whiskey is a story. It's a story in a glass. And if you enjoyed this story in a glass, now we didn't get personal. We tried not to say too much opinion, right? We got a little opinionated, but other than that, we tried not to do too much of that. So if you value that, think about giving me a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. I would appreciate it very much. It does let people see me in the algorithm. Yes, podcasts have an algorithm too. And if you guys enjoy this, think about joining the Patreon, patreon.com/the Whiskey Shaman. And I want to thank Chris so much for bringing this up. And I'm happy to talk about it. And happy that your package arrived safely, because I was a little scared of that one. But anyway, y'all be good. I appreciate all of y'all for being here. Make sure you drink water, right? When you're drinking whiskey, you have to understand it is alcohol. And you might not feel it right now, but give it 20 minutes and it absorbs into your bloodstream a little bit more. And next thing you know, it's too far. So make sure that you're drinking water comparable to the amount of whiskey you're drinking, if not double. I always do double. Like, let's say that I had half an ounce or whatever, of said whiskey, then I will go back and have 5 ounces of water to not dilute, but kind of dilute, right? And then that way I'm of sober mind. Because the one thing in whiskey that we don't condone, and it happens to everybody, and I understand, is drunkenness, right? I am not condoning alcoholism, drunkenness, any of the things. I'm condoning us sitting around having a dram together and talking, because whiskey is storytelling. Whiskey is sharing memories and times together. Whiskey is not for covering up problems in your life. And if you're having problems in your life, please reach out to me, Whiskey Shaman Podcast at gmail.com. I'll find you the help you need. If I can't help you, I'll find somebody who can. So I appreciate all of you for being here. It's been a blast. The next episode is one I've been waiting on for a long time. It's going to be so much fun. So stay tuned. Not that all of the episodes that I've done haven't been amazing. Some of them you're just like geek out on. Okay. So prepare to be geeked. Anyway, y'all be good. And until next time, keep your spirits up. Peace.